Hello and welcome. This is All My Good Ideas Were Taken, and I am Victoria. I'm camera shy, so I'm not going to be in front of the camera today. I want to talk about some of the helpful hints and tips, or just things that help me in the projects that I make. So we got a little bit of crochet, we got a little bit of knitting, we got various other tidbits. And so let's just get started. First off, let's talk about this right here. I have found that it's very helpful to keep all the little notions and various things that I might need in my projects in this handy little case. And whatever project I'm working on, I generally do smaller projects, nothing major or massive like Afghans and things like that. The biggest thing I probably make is a baby blanket. So my projects are generally carried around in a smaller bag, something like this. If you recognize this from Joann Fabric, you know it's the smaller one, and I carry whatever project I'm working on and this in the bag with it. So I tend to carry my projects around with me. I have time to kill during the days, and sometimes we're in doctor's offices or whatever. Anyway, I find it very handy to have this. And I keep in this lots of little things. Stitch markers, because stitch markers are handy in knitting, sometimes in crochet as well. And my mom loves these little tiny Altoid tins, so she buys them, eats all the mints, and gives me the cans. So I have several of them. So I use them. They're perfect in here. So stitch markers, tiny pair of scissors, which I have a pair of scissors in there. This is a row counter for knitting. I have another one that's larger, doesn't fit in the can. They're in there, even though I don't use them hardly at all. These, I don't know what these are. I believe they are stitch markers. They have a little catch. I've never used them. They're in here though. This one, these are some other kind of stitch markers. I use them once in a while, but there's like a safety pin. What's in here? I don't even know what's in here. Oh, just all of that. These are little things that I put on some of my crochet hooks. If I can find one real quick. It has one. It gives it more of a grip. And I found that it makes it a little fatter and easier to hold on to. That problem has been solved with another solution. Anyway, these are the ones I haven't used yet. I don't know what their purpose is. They're in the notions section for the knitting and crochet stuff. I just cut the closed off end off and squish it onto my crochet hook. It's kind of a battle, but it works great. Anyway, so that's what's in that one. Put all this back away. So what else is in my little bag? Have a guide, crochet and knitting needle hook sizes, as well as a gauge. We'll get into that later. These are tips for knitting needles so that your work doesn't fall off your knitting needle. I don't use these much anymore, and we'll find out why later. A flexible tape measure, always handy, good thing to have when you're trying to make a project of a certain size, or maybe you need to measure something before you get started. It's right here. You know exactly where it is. These are stitch markers I threw together before I had stitch markers that I ordered for a project that didn't need different everywhere I was putting a stitch marker was a change, but it was all the same change in the same way every time, so they're all the same. This little dealie, this safety pin looking thing, is a stitch holder for when you need to take your work off your needles. You slip your work on here, close it up, and it holds it and doesn't lose the stitches. So when you need to put it back on your needles, it's all good to go. This is my safety line. We'll talk about that later. I also have some craft needles. I don't know that I've had to use these. Actually, since I got this with darning needles in it, I haven't used this much at all, but I keep it in there because you never know. And then there's this is a little container that has darning needles, because when you finish your work you have to weave in your ends, and that is super duper handy. I really like this particular one. It came with 2 of these inside, and this is the one I prefer. I like that it has that little bent tip, but these are the other darning needles that I already had. So I just keep everything in there nice and neat. All these things that I talk about will be in there will be a link in the description below, so that if you're interested in purchasing them, you can go to Amazon and find pretty much all of this stuff. Another stitch holder, row counter, which I don't generally use a row counter. I've had those for a very long time. A pin and a pair of scissors. Always handy. So that's what's in my bag of notions. And let me put them back in here real quick. Put my safety line back in. I find through various projects over the years, these are things I've needed periodically here and there, and they've just made their way into my little notions bag here. And I recommend, that everybody have something like this, because you need a small pair of scissors, you need a tape measure, you need stitch holders, you need darning needles, things like that. And no matter whether you're knitting or crocheting, and it's super handy to have it all in one little case. Now this little case, some of you may recognize it. Originally it came, I think when I was in high school, I took a home ec class where we learned to sew on sewing machines and stuff like that. And I want to say that that's where this came from, that it was a kit my mom bought me that had little spools of thread and a packet of needles and scissors and a pin cushion, the tomato pin cushion. I don't know what else was in here, but all these years later I still have this thing, and it works perfect for this. So I will leave a link in the description to something similar, because I cannot find this exact kit anywhere. My niece is wanting to learn to crochet, and so I was looking to get her this sort of a thing too, because I set her up with some skeins of yarn and some crochet hooks and darning needles and that sort of thing, and I told her, you need to find something to keep them in. I need to find her something like this. So at any rate, this very important supplies. So now that we've talked about that, let's move on. This is also a very important thing to have, because unless your knitting needles and crochet hooks are stamped, like embossed, with what their sizes are, it's going to rub off. Take, for instance, my bamboo needles here. They have, if you can see, if it'll focus, it's printed on there, but it's just printed. It's not embossed or stamped. And as you can tell, it's fading. Some of the sizes that I use a lot, it has faded quite a bit. And so when your needles or your hooks aren't marked, this will tell you what size they are. Whatever hole they fit in. So that's not quite a size 10 or 6 millimeter. It's going to be more like a 6.5. And that's exactly what it said, 6.5. So this thing is very handy for that. Also, if you need to make a swatch, if you're not sure how your sizing is going to turn out, your pattern will always say, you know, it'll give you gauging for the finished product. But it's always a good idea to take the yarn and the size knitting needle or crochet hook that you want to use and make a square and then measure your gauge to see how many stitches make up an inch and how many rows make up an inch. So this little dealie is fantastic and very handy, and I recommend everybody have one. Now let's talk about some crochet hooks. I want to make sure I remember all of my helpful hints. I also keep my crochet hooks in a makeup bag like this. This is super handy to keep them all in one place. Now I don't carry this around with me. I take out the hook I'm going to use and then put these back on the shelf. But it's nice that I know exactly where they all are. I've got a couple other things in here. I've got another pair of scissors and a stitch holder, and I have a what is this thing? Needle punch needles, or I don't know what you call them, but it's this contraption. There's one more piece of it right there, if you can see it in the reflection. At any rate, it lives in there too because I've never used it, but I want to. And one day I will, and I know exactly where it's going to be. But I have got so many crochet hooks. Some of these I bought myself. Some of these were given to me. My grandmother, when she decided she couldn't crochet anymore because her hands were too arthritic and her eyesight wasn't good enough, she gave me all of her crochet hooks. So I've got quite a few. And a word on crochet hooks. I've got some of these plastic crochet hooks. I don't like them very much. I find that most yarns don't slide on them very well. So I tend to stick to aluminum. I tried some of these, I bought them at Hobby Lobby. They're rosewood. And I thought, oh, how elegant to have these crochet hooks that have this nice little engraved turned end. But they're not that great. The point catches on the yarn a lot. And I just find that I really didn't like them. I've got 3 of them in there. At any rate, I just stick with aluminum or steel crochet hooks. They just work so much better for me. And it's super nice to keep them all in this bag. Now, a few months ago, I ordered a set of these crochet hooks because I was having some, I don't know, I guess arthritis in my thumb, and it was bothering me with the skinnier needles, and so I got these big fat ones, and oh my goodness, I love these. These are going to be my go-to. They're just fantastic. So you should definitely look into getting a set of these. I think everybody should use them. They're going to save your hands and fingers. They're wonderful. Close that back up. Now let's talk about knitting needles. There's knitting needles to talk about, and it's a lot of knitting needles. This is mainly preference, but I find that I like using circular needles for all my projects. It doesn't have to be a circular project to use circular knitting needles. You can, for instance, this is the beginning of a dishcloth. I'm not knitting in, it's not a circular project, but for beginning knitters, sometimes they don't really understand what I say when you don't join it in the round. But it just means that when you get to the end of your row, it's like any other set of knitting needles. Let me get down there real quick. You get to the end of your row and you do your last stitch. And like a normal set of knitting needles, you turn your work. And I like this because as somebody with a big belly, I find that long knitting needles tend to get in the way because I don't know about you, but when I knit or crochet, I generally hold it closer to my body. It's more relaxed. And with a long knitting needle, it just gets in the way. You can get shorter. These are 12 inch, somewhere around there, 10, 12-inch needles. Knitting needles come as long as 14 inches. Well, there's some longer than that, but I don't know that I've seen them. You can get short ones that are about 9 inches. They're about that long. I like those, but even I still prefer a circular knitting needle. And as far as plastic or metal, or even bamboo, I choose out of all of these, I choose either an aluminum or a bamboo. With the bamboo, well, with the aluminum, your needles will slip right out. A lot of times you'll be knitting away and you just let go at the wrong angle and there goes that needle right out onto the floor. And then you panic and if you're not very careful, you will drop stitches. I find that plastic needles hold the yarn better, but depending on the kind of plastic, you might, I don't know how well you can see this. These are two different kinds of plastic. This one doesn't let the yarn slide very well. This one does okay, but it's still a long knitting needle. So I tend to stick with circular knitting needles. I have a whole set of these. These are 32-inch circular knitting needles. And then I have some super long ones here. But it doesn't matter, short or long, it still doesn't get in the way. But for a big project, a circular knitting needle is fantastic. Whether you're knitting in the round or not. I just find that they work better. The yarn slides on them really nicely, but it's not too free. And they just work great. I recently got this. I've got a whole set of these aluminum circular needles. And this sample here is actually the first time that I've used them, and they're great. And I don't really worry about my work slipping out because it slides, but it doesn't just fly off of there. And so that I find works really well. So that's pretty much all I have to say about knitting needles, I think. I was going to say also something that a lot of knitters don't know about or remember to use is a safety line. Now, a safety line will save your behind. What it is just some other color of yarn that you take. Let's just do it real quick. Let me get my darning needle in my handy kit. Take a blunted needle. Darning needle works great. And thread this safety line through there. Come on, get in. I know you want to. Oh, of course it doesn't want to pick up all the strands. Alright, so you thread your safety line through, and all you do is go through and run it through all your loops. Just through the bottoms. Try not to split your yarns. I guess I could run it down over here and that might make it easier. Heck yeah. Alright, so you've got this other color of thread now. In the bottom of your loops. and you move on with your pattern. And the point of doing this is so you could do a section of your pattern and you know that it's correct. There are no missed stitches, no errors, nothing you're going to want to rip out and fix. So you run your safety line. And then you carry on knitting. Just be sure you don't catch it in your stitch. And you just knit on. And then later on, let's say you get halfway through, like let's say 10 more rows. You do 5 more and realize, oh my gosh, I've made a terrible mistake. What am I going to do? Let me finish this row. So you've done a few more rows and you realize you made a mistake. So what do? Well, because you have a safety line, you can pull your work off your needle and undo however many rows you need to get back to the place where you know it's correct. And then you put your needle back in, making sure you don't catch that, split through that safety line. Put your hook back on, or your needle back on, and then start that section over again. And when you get to the next section finished, or a chunk of rows that you're comfortable with, they're done right, you just pull it out and then run it through again at the next section. And it will save you from having to rip out stitches that you didn't mean to rip out. If you just pull this out and you want to rip back 2 rows, you have to do it pretty carefully. And on a big project, it can be very difficult if you take your needle out of your whole, gigantic afghan or whatever it is, and you're trying to rip out, 2 or 3 rows. You have to be very careful because you'll end up ripping more stitches down some places and not others, and it can be very problematic. So a safety line is an excellent thing to utilize in your knitting. Another thing that I have, another way of managing that I have found, is that when I pull yarn off the ball, you do this, and you've got this roll in your hand. So you're pulling yarn out, pulling yarn out, pulling yarn out, and then you just flop it down and you start pulling your yarn, and it sticks and tangles a little bit. Well, I have found, and this is a totally nitpicky thing and completely OCD, and I recognize that, but I'm sharing it with you because somebody else might be like, that makes so much sense. So you pull out your yarn and drop it, pick it back up, and feed it back so that it piles up on top of itself with the working yarn that you're going to be pulling on the top. Because the other way, when you pull it out and just drop it, the yarn you're going to be using is coming from the bottom of that pile you just flopped down. Now it's coming from the top, and it's a lot smoother and a lot less tangly. And I have found that works very well. It helps out a lot. And I'll pull out a whole bunch and then take the time to feed it back just the way I just did. And then I can go a long time without having to pull yarn out. And once I am in the mood to work on the project, it helps me manage my yarn better. 2 more things. One, when you're starting, let's talk about casting on just for a minute. Quick and easy. Let me grab a needle here. Even a crochet hook. Let's grab a crochet hook. So you're casting on or starting your first stitch. You got to get your slip stitch on your hook or on your knitting needle. Lots of people will do this kind of business and I'm going to do whatever and make a slip stitch, and I don't even know how they do it. And that wasn't it. This is how I do mine. My ball of yarn that I'm working from is on this way. tail is out here this way. So you hold your tail, so this would be the cut end where your tail is. Hold it across your fingers. Grab the yarn right there. Those. Go over those two. Come back around. Over those two. Come back around across the top. Grab it with your pinky. So now you can put your hook right through there, under this one, and grab this one and pull it out. There's your slip stitch. Once you figure it out, it goes really fast. And there you go. You're ready to start. I'll show it to you again. Tail goes out towards your left arm. Hold your yarn, wrap it around these two fingers, over, back down to the pinky, let the pinky grab it. Put your hook in right here, to the back, grab that yarn, pull it out, off your fingers. And there you go. Slip stitch done. Quick and easy. Doesn't even have to be as big and exaggerated. So there's that. Now, last tip that I find extremely helpful are center pull balls. And this, I have a ball winder, so I wound this up on the ball winder. However, you can make a center pull ball super easy using just your hands. I will show you. So, I got this all backwards now, but you'll get the picture. Here's your center pull. So this is your tail. You cut your beginning end, okay? Hold it in your hand. Put your thumb up. Wrap around your thumb several times. Not too tight. Go around several times. Once you've got a fair amount, thumb up, keep holding that tail, don't let go of it at all. Start wrapping, catching your yarn on the bottom edge and over the top like this. Come up and over and up and over, and you can line them up side by side. Hang on, I got my stuff tangled. And when you filled up the space there, grab the whole thing, keep holding your tail, and turn it. And then keep going. And keep going and keep going and keep going. Around the thumb, turn, keep going, and it will create this ginormous center pull ball. It'll get big and come up and start looking like an egg. You won't be able to see your thumb no more. It'll get really big. And if you did it right, it'll kind of look like an egg with a hole in the middle. And it sits beautifully on the tabletop or the end table or wherever. And you pull your yarn right out the middle. It makes a fantastic center pull ball. I kind of like doing it the end result I like better than using my ball winder, because the ball winder tends to drop the bottom of it. This thread yarn falls off. And anyway, just keep going. My arm gets tired. At any rate, when you're all done, pop it off your thumb, tuck your end in somewhere outside, and then you've got a center pull ball just like that. It's like magic. And I find that to be very helpful too. Before I got my yarn winder, that was how I always did it. And then I thought, oh, I need to have a yarn winder. It'll make such nice cakes of yarn. And it does, but there are things about it I don't like. At any rate, I believe that is all the handy dandy tips and tricks I have for tonight. I can't think of another. I'll have links to these things, like this pack of needles and the pack of aluminum circular needles, a pack of bamboo circulars, both the short ones and the long ones, the darning needles, maybe I can find some cases like this, inexpensive, because I really do think this is such a handy thing. At any rate, I think that's it. Thank you so much for watching. If this was at all helpful to you, please leave a like and subscribe and hit that bell to get notified. Those things help out. The like helps out my channel, and the subscription and the notification will let you know when I post something new, so that you can check that video out too. So thanks for watching, and I'm out.